Welcome back to our YouTube channel. It's polarizing. We're glad to have you here. Today we're diving deep into one of the most complex and polarizing issues of our time, the Israel-Gaza conflict. It's a topic that's been in the news for decades, often sparking heated debates around the world. But how much do we really know about it? How did it all start? Who are the key players? And most importantly, is there a potential for peace in the future? In this video, we'll be traveling back in time to explore the roots of this conflict, delve into the key events and players that have shaped it, and examine the impact it has had on the lives of ordinary civilians. Stay with us as we unravel the intricacies of the Israel-Gaza conflict, and don't forget to hit the like button, share our content, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. Let's get started. Have you ever wondered how the long-standing conflict between Israel and Gaza came about? To understand the roots of this complex issue, we need to travel back to the early 20th century. The region we now know as Israel and the Palestinian territories was then part of the Ottoman Empire. But with the empire's collapse after World War I, Britain took control, establishing what was known as the British Mandate for Palestine. In the late 1940s, the United Nations proposed a partition plan. This plan aimed to divide the land into two states, one for Jewish people, largely survivors of the Holocaust, and another for the Arab majority who had been living there for centuries. Jerusalem, a city sacred to both Jews and Arabs, was to be placed under international administration. However, the plan was met with resistance, particularly from the Arab states and Palestinian Arabs, who saw it as a continuation of colonial rule. Despite the opposition, the Jewish Agency accepted the plan, and on May 14, 1948, the State of Israel was established. The declaration sparked a war known as the Arab-Israeli War, or War of Independence, depending on which side you ask. When the fighting ceased, Israel had expanded its territory beyond what was allocated in the UN partition plan. About 700,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled from their homes in what Palestinians today refer to as the Nakba, or catastrophe. These refugees and their descendants make up a significant proportion of the Palestinian population in Gaza and the West Bank today. In the decades that followed, a series of wars and uprisings, or Intifadas, would further entrench the divide between Israelis and Palestinians. And as we move through the timeline, we'll see how each event added another layer to the conflict, making it even more challenging to untangle. Thus, the seeds of the conflict were sown, leading to a series of wars and ongoing tensions. As we move forward, we'll delve deeper into the major events and key players that have shaped this long and complex confrontation. The Six-Day War in 1967 was a pivotal moment in the history of this conflict. The Six-Day War, a swift yet impactful conflict, erupted in the month of June 1967. The war saw Israel pitted against an Arab coalition led by Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. In a surprise, preemptive strike, Israel successfully neutralized the Egyptian Air Force, taking the upper hand in the opening hours of the conflict. With the skies now clear, Israel turned its attention to the ground, rapidly advancing into the Sinai Peninsula, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. The speed and scale of Israel's territorial gains were staggering, effectively tripling the size of the area under its control in less than a week. The war ended with a ceasefire on June 11th. However, the reverberations of the war were far from over. The most significant consequence was the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank by Israel, a move that drastically altered the dynamics of the Israel-Palestine conflict. With the occupation, over 1 million Palestinians came under Israeli control, a situation that gave rise to a new wave of tension and resistance. The occupied territories also became a focal point for international criticism, with Israel facing mounting pressure to withdraw. Besides, the war had another profound result. It marked a shift in the Arab world's approach to the conflict. The defeat led to a stronger emphasis on political and diplomatic efforts, culminating in the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002. Yet the Six-Day War also had an internal impact on Israel. It fostered a sense of invincibility and laid the foundations for the settler movement, which would later have serious implications for the peace process. The Six-Day War significantly intensified the conflict, setting the stage for future confrontations. The war and its aftermath continued to shape the course of the Israel-Palestine conflict, influencing the decisions and tactics of the parties involved. It was not just a war of 6 days, but a war that has echoed across more than 5 decades. The First and Second Intifadas were periods of intensified Palestinian uprisings. In the late 20th century, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict reached a boiling point, culminating in 2 waves of Palestinian uprisings known as the Intifadas. The word intifada itself means shaking off, and it certainly shook the region, leaving profound impacts that are still felt today. The First Intifada began in December of 1987. The immediate cause was a traffic incident, but the uprising was a long time coming, born out of years of frustration and resentment. This intifada was characterized by widespread civil disobedience, strikes, boycotts, graffiti, and barricades, as well as stone throwing and Molotov cocktail attacks against Israeli military forces. After 6 long years, the First Intifada began to wane. It left an indelible mark on the region, leading to a loss of life, economic devastation, and the signing of the Oslo Accords in 1993. This agreement was supposed to pave the way for peace, but instead, it laid the groundwork for the Second Intifada. The Second Intifada broke out in September 2000, following the controversial visit of Ariel Sharon, then the opposition leader in Israel, to the Temple Mount, a site sacred to both Jews and Muslims. This intifada was far more violent than the first, with suicide bombings, rocket attacks, and military operations becoming a tragic part of daily life. The Second Intifada officially ended in February 2005, but not before it had claimed thousands of lives and caused significant damage on both sides. It also led to a hardening of positions, with peace seeming further away than ever before. Both intifadas had profound effects on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They brought the issue to the forefront of international consciousness, but also entrenched divisions, making a peaceful resolution more challenging. These uprisings brought international attention to the conflict and further complicated the situation. In 1987, a new player emerged in the conflict: Hamas. Born out of the First Intifada, Hamas, an acronym for Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, or the Islamic Resistance Movement, was established with the objective of liberating Palestine from Israeli occupation through jihad, or holy war. Hamas's creation was largely a response to the perceived failure of secular Palestinian factions to effectively challenge Israel. The group drew inspiration from Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood and sought to merge the political struggle for Palestinian self-determination with the spiritual struggle for Islamic revival. Hamas's political wing sought to win hearts and minds by providing social services that the Palestinian Authority was often unable to deliver, such as healthcare, education, and welfare. This grassroots approach allowed Hamas to build a solid base of support among the Palestinian populace. However, it is Hamas's military wing, the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, that has had the most direct impact on the conflict. The brigades have carried out numerous attacks against Israeli military and civilian targets, including suicide bombings, rocket attacks, and kidnappings. These actions have led to Hamas being designated as a terrorist organization by many countries, including the United States and the European Union. Hamas's rise to power culminated in the 2006 Palestinian elections, when it won a surprising victory over the Fatah party, leading to a brief but bloody civil war in Gaza the following year. Since then, Hamas has governed the Gaza Strip, while Fatah has retained control of the West Bank. The entry of Hamas into the conflict has complicated the peace process. On one hand, its refusal to recognize Israel's right to exist and its commitment to armed resistance have made negotiations difficult. On the other hand, its political success shows that any lasting solution must address the aspirations and grievances of its supporters. Hamas's entry into the conflict brought a new dimension to the struggle. In 2007, Israel imposed a blockade on Gaza, which has had far-reaching implications. The blockade, sparked by the Hamas takeover of the Gaza Strip, was deemed necessary by Israel for its security. The blockade aimed to prevent arms and other military resources from reaching Hamas, a group Israel, the United States, and European Union classify as a terrorist organization. But let's delve deeper into the effects of this blockade. The implications for the people of Gaza have been profound and far-reaching, affecting every facet of their lives. Goods and resources became scarce, and the economy of Gaza was hit hard. Unemployment rates skyrocketed, and poverty became widespread. Many basic necessities like food, clean water, and medical supplies became luxury items for the majority. The blockade has also severely restricted movement in and out of Gaza, further isolating the region. This has had a significant impact on the people of Gaza, many of whom have never been able to leave the Strip. It has also made it incredibly difficult for aid and rescue workers to access the area, further exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. Now, let's talk about the international reactions. The blockade has been met with widespread criticism from the international community. Many human rights organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have referred to the blockade as a form of collective punishment, which is illegal under international law. The United Nations has also voiced its concern, stating that the blockade has resulted in a dignity crisis for the people of Gaza. Yet despite international outcry, the blockade remains in place. It continues to stoke the flames of conflict, as desperate conditions often breed desperation. The people of Gaza feel trapped, and their frustration feeds the cycle of violence. In conclusion, while the blockade was initially implemented for security purposes, it has resulted in a humanitarian crisis. The blockade has exacerbated the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and heightened tensions. The situation in Gaza is a stark reminder of the devastating impact that protracted conflict can have on a region and its people. In the past decade, the conflict has seen periods of intense fighting followed by temporary ceasefires. Our journey through the recent history of this conflict takes us to the last 10 years, a time marked by a series of major conflicts and temporary ceasefires. The cycle of violence and peace has been a recurring theme, with each side seeking to assert its position, often at a great cost. One of the significant conflicts during this period was Operation Cast Lead, launched at the end of 2008. This was a 3-week armed conflict in the Gaza Strip, during which both sides suffered heavy losses. The operation ended with a unilateral ceasefire announced by both Israel and Hamas, but not before leaving a trail of devastation. A few years later, in the summer of 2014, another major conflict erupted, known as Operation Protective Edge. For 7 weeks, the region was once again engulfed in violence, with rocket attacks and airstrikes causing widespread destruction. This too ended with a ceasefire, brokered by Egypt, bringing some respite to the beleaguered region. The most recent ceasefire came in May 2021, following 11 days of intense fighting. This period saw an escalation in rocket attacks and retaliatory airstrikes, causing significant casualties and destruction. The ceasefire, brokered by Egypt with support from the United States, succeeded in halting the fighting, at least for the time being. These ceasefires, however temporary, offer a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak scenario. They provide a much-needed respite for the people living in the region, a chance to rebuild, and perhaps more importantly, a chance to envision a future beyond the conflict. However, the underlying issues remain unresolved, and each ceasefire is often seen as nothing more than a brief pause before the next round of violence. The cycle continues, with each side blaming the other for the lack of progress towards a lasting peace. Despite these temporary reprieves, a lasting peace remains elusive. The conflict has had a devastating impact on civilians on both sides. This is a statement that carries a heavy weight, a weight borne by millions of individuals who found themselves caught in the crossfire of this enduring clash. Let's take a moment to delve into the humanitarian implications of the conflict. This is not just about numbers and statistics. Each figure represents a life altered, a family shattered, a community in ruins. The casualties of this conflict are not merely soldiers on a battlefield, but ordinary people leading ordinary lives. Mothers, fathers, children, grandparents, all have paid the price of this ongoing strife. Picture this. You're living in a state of perpetual uncertainty, not knowing when the next rocket might strike, or when you'll need to flee your home. This is the reality for countless individuals on both sides of the conflict. Displacement has become a common occurrence, with homes and neighborhoods reduced to rubble, forcing families to seek refuge wherever they can find it. But beyond the immediate effects of the violence, there's the impact on daily life. Imagine the strain on resources, the disruption of services, the closing of schools. Imagine living under a constant state of emergency, where even the most mundane tasks become a challenge. The psychological toll is immense, with a generation of children growing up knowing nothing but conflict. Economic repercussions are also severe. Jobs are lost, businesses are destroyed, and opportunities for growth are stifled. The infrastructure that forms the backbone of any society, like hospitals, schools, and roads, is often damaged or destroyed, setting back development by decades. And yet, amidst the chaos and the devastation, there are stories of resilience, stories of individuals and communities coming together, of people helping each other in times of need, of hope persisting in the face of adversity. The human cost of the conflict continues to mount with no end in sight. But it's important to remember that behind each statistic, each headline, there's a human story. A story of loss, yes, but also of survival and resilience. And it's these stories that remind us of the urgent need for a resolution, for an end to the suffering. The international community has played a significant role in the conflict. Now, let's delve into the complex web of international involvement in the conflict. Many nations and organizations worldwide have sought to mediate, influence, and sometimes even escalate the situation. Starting with the United States, the nation has been a long-standing ally of Israel, providing substantial military and financial support. The U.S.'s role is often a point of controversy, as critics argue that American support enables Israel's actions in the conflict, while others maintain that Israel, as a democratic ally in a volatile region, deserves this support. On the other hand, we have the United Nations. The UN has been deeply involved since the conflict's inception, passing numerous resolutions and deploying peacekeeping forces. However, the efficacy of these resolutions is often questioned, as many have been ignored or bypassed by the parties involved. The UN's role has been one of mediator and monitor, but with limited enforcement power, its impact is often seen as minimal. Let's not forget about other Middle Eastern countries. Some, like Egypt and Jordan, have signed peace treaties with Israel and played mediatory roles in various negotiations. Others, like Iran, have supported Palestinian groups, sometimes even those considered as terrorist organizations, further fueling the conflict. The Middle East geopolitics, with its alliances and rivalries, significantly influences the dynamics of the conflict. The European Union too has been involved, often advocating for a two-state solution and providing humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. However, the EU's stance has been criticized for being too passive and not doing enough to push for a resolution. The international community's involvement is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it brings attention and aid to those affected by the conflict. On the other, it can also complicate matters, as each actor has its interests and ideologies, and these can sometimes conflict with those of others. The international community remains divided on the conflict, further complicating efforts towards a resolution. As we move forward, the question remains, can the international community unite to find a peaceful resolution to this long-standing conflict? Only time will tell. What does the future hold for the conflict between Israel and Gaza? Looking forward, it's clear that the path to peace is not a straight line. It's a winding road filled with obstacles, from deep-seated historical grievances to socio-political complexities. But let's not be disheartened. Instead, let's explore the potential solutions that could pave the way towards a peaceful resolution. First, the most formidable obstacle is the mutual distrust and fear that have been built over decades of conflict. This has led to a cycle of violence where each act of aggression justifies the next. Breaking this cycle requires a significant shift in perceptions and attitudes, a process that will take time and concerted efforts from both sides. Secondly, the issue of Israeli settlements in the West Bank continues to be a major stumbling block. Any lasting peace agreement will need to address this contentious issue. A solution could involve halting further settlement expansion and negotiating land swaps, but this would require compromise from both sides. Thirdly, the political division between Fatah and Hamas complicates the peace process. A unified Palestinian leadership is essential for negotiating and implementing a peace agreement. Reconciliation between these factions, while difficult, is not impossible and could be a key step towards peace. Lastly, the role of the international community cannot be underestimated. International actors can facilitate dialogue, provide economic aid, and exert diplomatic pressure to encourage both sides to make the necessary concessions for peace. The world must remain committed to helping Israel and Gaza find a way to coexist peacefully. The road to peace is undoubtedly steep and rocky, but we must remember that peace is more than the absence of war. It's about building a future where Israeli and Palestinian children can grow up without fear, where families can live their lives without the threat of violence looming over them. While the path to peace is fraught with challenges, the hope for a peaceful resolution endures. Every step taken towards peace, no matter how small, is a step in the right direction. In this scene, let's take a moment to shine the spotlight on those who tirelessly advocate for peace amidst the conflict. These advocates come from varied backgrounds, be it Israelis, Palestinians, or international activists, all united by a common goal: the pursuit of peace. Their work often goes unnoticed, but their contributions are invaluable in keeping the hope for a peaceful resolution alive. Among them are organizations like the Parents Circle Families Forum, an Israeli-Palestinian organization made up of families who have lost a loved one due to the conflict. They promote dialogue and understanding as a means to break the cycle of violence. Similarly, B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights organization, works relentlessly to document and expose human rights abuses in the occupied territories. On the Palestinian side, we have groups like the Palestinian Center for Nonviolent Communication, which teaches young Palestinians about peaceful resistance and negotiation tactics. Internationally, organizations like the American Friends Service Committee and Jewish Voice for Peace work tirelessly to educate the public about the realities of the conflict and advocate for a just solution. While the political leaders may be at odds, these advocates remind us that there are many on both sides who yearn for peace and are willing to work towards it. Their efforts, although often overshadowed by the louder voices of conflict, are a testament to the enduring human spirit and its capacity for empathy, compassion, and reconciliation. As we continue to explore the prospects for peace, let's keep these voices in mind and remember that peace is not just a diplomatic agreement, but a collective endeavor that requires the commitment of all parties involved. We've covered a lot of ground today, summarizing the key points of the Israel-Gaza conflict. From the historical roots of this enduring strife to the recent confrontations, we've traversed a timeline marked by critical events and turning points. We started by delving into the historical background of the conflict. Unearthed were the seeds of discord sown during the Ottoman Empire's fall and the subsequent British Mandate of Palestine, which set the stage for the conflict we see today. Then we moved on to the Six-Day War and its aftermath, a landmark event that led to Israel's occupation of the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. This event has been a cornerstone in the narrative of the Israel-Gaza conflict. The first and second Intifadas were our next focal points. These uprisings marked a significant shift in the dynamics of the conflict, bringing to the fore the Palestinian struggle for self-determination and the Israeli security concerns. We then explored the role of Hamas, an organization that has had a significant influence on the trajectory of this conflict. Its rise to power in Gaza and its stance towards Israel has had far-reaching implications. The Gaza Blockade was next under our lens, a contentious policy that has deepened the divide between Israel and Gaza, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis in the region. Our journey then took us to recent conflicts and ceasefires, a cycle of violence that has seen moments of calm followed by periods of intense conflict, which have shaped the present-day situation. We looked at the impact on civilians, the everyday people caught in the crossfire. Their stories put a human face to the abstract concept of conflict. The role of the international community was our penultimate point of focus. The global response, or lack thereof, has played a crucial part in the escalation and mitigation of the conflict. Finally, we looked at the prospects for peace. Despite the seemingly insurmountable obstacles, hope persists for a peaceful resolution, fueled by the tireless efforts of peace advocates on both sides. Understanding the complexities of this conflict is the first step towards advocating for a peaceful and just resolution. And that brings us to the end of our journey through the Israel-Gaza conflict. It's a complex situation filled with historical intricacies and present-day challenges. However, it's important to remember that understanding is the first step towards meaningful action. If you found this video insightful, we urge you to share it with others. Spread the knowledge, spark conversations, and be a part of the solution. The more we understand, the better we can advocate for peace, justice, and equality. If you'd like to delve deeper into this subject or other polarizing topics, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, It's Polarizing. We appreciate your support, and thank you for taking the time to educate yourself on these critical matters. Remember, change starts with you. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. Thank you for watching.